Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the webinar. I'm Cecilia from the NCBFA Educational Institute, and I'd like to thank you for joining us for today's ACE webinar. Before we begin, I'd like to mention a couple of housekeeping items. All attendees are in listen-only mode, but questions may be asked by typing them into the question box on the webinar toolbar at any time. Questions will be addressed at the end of the presentation. Participation in today's webinar is with 1.5 CCS credits. Please allow a couple of weeks for your transcript to be updated. Also, I see some questions about the presentation. A PDF copy of the presentation was sent out with the webinar credentials earlier today. I'll also be sending it out after the webinar is over. I'm excited to welcome Cindy Allen as our speaker today. Cindy is an active member of the NCBFA Customs Committee, as well as a current COAC member. Previously, she served as the Executive Director of CBP's ACE Business Office, as well as Director of the NCBFA Educational Institute. Her 25 years of brokerage experience working with transportation and logistics companies is a key advantage when collaborating with customers to deliver the best solutions possible. Cindy has been a licensed customs broker since 1990 and holds the industry credentials of CCS and CES. She is joined today by Jeff Powell, who is currently president of CH Powell Company, an international logistics provider, freight forwarder, and customs broker that is family-owned and headquartered in Boston. Mr. Powell received his customs broker license in 1989, shortly after relocating to Baltimore from the Boston office. Jeff is a past president of the Baltimore Customs Brokers and Forwarders Association, and in 2001, he formed and is the previous chairman of the Affiliated Presidents Network, a group that comprises all the presidents of 28 local NCBFA affiliated associations throughout the country. After holding various positions in the NCBFA, Mr. Powell was elected as its president in April 2014 and currently serves in that capacity. We are honored to have them both with us today, so without further delay, I will turn it over to Cindy.
Thank you, and I'm happy to be here and happy to have Jeff here at my side to talk to everyone about the most important topic I think that's really affecting our industry today. And I want to welcome everyone. I know we have a good mix of both customs brokers and freight forwarders as well as some importers out there. And I do want to let you know that this is going to be aimed mostly at customs brokers. Although it's important for importers to listen with an open ear so that you know how critical it is to have open and honest communication with your customs brokers and your freight forwarders in your capacity as an importer, also in the future as your capacity as an exporter, because as we all know, both importing and exporting are going to be affected by the ACE changes that are coming down the road. So today we're going to focus on how we're going to get from here to February 27th. And a few people have already said, what do you mean February 27th? It's February 28th. We all have to be ready on February 28th. So as a customs broker, I have to be ready to go when that switch is flipped on February 27th. So I thought, you know, what better picture than a fire, because right now we're kind of under a fire. We have a lot of heat from all of the different agencies and from customs and even from the White House to meet this deadline of February 27th. And how are we going to do that as an industry without losing our clients, without losing our employees, and really without losing our sanity? So without further ado, Jeff, I don't know if you had any opening comments?
Yeah, I just want to say that, you know, this particular seminar or webinar that we're doing is looking at those that may not have gotten on to ACE just now, and to really give a 30,000-foot viewpoint of what's going to be going on between now and February 27th. This Friday, we're doing another webinar with Sandy Cody from OHL, talking about issues with ACE cargo release and some of the problems for those that may have a little bit more experience on ACE. But if you haven't got it on, you know, it might be worthwhile for you to see what you're going to be going up against or what you're going to be working with. We strongly encourage everybody to get on ACE now. This isn't, you know, a get-out-of-jail-free card that you don't have to get on until February 28th. We'll talk a little bit about some of those things in the webinar today, but we encourage strongly, start getting in, get your feet wet, learn about it slowly, so that when February 28th comes around, there aren't as many issues.
So let's jump right into this. So what is the updated timeline? As you know, Customs announced that they were moving away from the November 1st timeline. And we'll talk a little bit about the efforts that the NCBFAA had in that decision with Customs to change that. But really, I wanted to put this up, and this is directly from U.S. Customs website, from the CBP website. And I highlighted a couple of the phrases here. Why? Because I think it's very important. A lot of comments that I've heard in the industry over the past couple of years have really said, why doesn't CBP understand? Why can't we get them to understand our issues, our business? Why can't we get them to collectively move toward a more reasonable approach? And while we think that the new timeline is a little bit more reasonable in the approach, I think what this statement really does highlight is it is out of Customs control. It is out of the CBP control. And without coming out and saying that, there are a couple of clues in this statement that tell us that. They say that over the past several months, CBP has worked closely with partner government agencies, the PGAs, and the White House, and that it was a result of meeting the milestones set forth by the presidential executive order, streamlining the import and export process for America's business. Now, we all firmly supported that executive order. We want all of the agencies to be in one system. We don't want to, as customs brokers or even as importers or exporters, to work out of multiple systems and have to program our systems to those multiple systems that we have. We know that would be disastrous, it would be costly, and it also would not work well for the government. We want them to have one view of the information coming in and out of the country as well, not only for security and safety purposes, but also for streamlining purposes. I don't want to have to go to 47 different agencies independently and ask them, are my goods good to go? Can I export them? Can I import them? So we supported this initiative very vigorously. However, I think what we didn't fully understand was that the involvement that the White House would then have through DHS in all of the decisions that would be made on the ACE program. I think that was a little bit of a surprise for all of us. And the level of involvement is really surprising. When I was in the ACE business office, while we briefed DHS and there was a briefing that went to the White House at a very, very, very high level, I was surprised that they even knew what the ACE initiative was. And I think they only knew because it was costing them so much money and political clout. And they were getting so much pressure from OMB. But the fact that they have involvement in so many of the timelines and so many of the agencies is really a surprise. But it also means that CBP no longer has the authority necessarily to make these decisions. They can make recommendations, but they also have to have that vetted by DHS, and then they have to go to the department level secretaries of all the other agencies through the BIC, the Border Interagency Executive Council, the BIEC, to really have that vetted. So it's a negotiation now. It's not just having to go, like I did when I was in the ACE business office, to the department and say, please let me do this. This is how we're going to do it. This is how much money we need to do it. And now is a interagency negotiation. So it's important to remember that, even though something that would make so much sense to CBP now has to make sense to all of the other secretaries. And that has proved to be even more of a challenge because some of these agencies have never had involvement in admissibility decisions, and they have never had the information available to them. And I don't know if you remember at the beginning of ACE, for those of you who are actually involved 10, 12, 15 years ago, we were designing this big mansion that we could have everything. It's kind of been that way over the past couple of years for some of these PGAs. They have access to all of this data now, and they're opening their eyes for the first time, saying, oh my gosh, there's all this data out there, and I can have it, and I can have all of this decision-making authority. And what we have struggled, and I know Jeff will talk about this when he talks about the PIC a little bit later, is helping them understand not only do they need this information, but the timing of the information is so important. Do you really need it at the time of release? So that's really what we're talking about. That's why I put these on here, because this really drove a lot of the timeline, because people said, why did they choose these timelines? Where did these come from? It was really a result of a lot of negotiation between all of these different agencies. So what are the timelines? The timelines, November 1st. We're all familiar with that. We all thought we were marching towards that. We all knew that we were going to be falling off a cliff. And I think that because of that, not just us, not just customs brokers, not just our importer clients and exporter clients, but CBP, their own capabilities were not necessarily complete, and definitely the PGAs knew that they would not be ready. And even though in a lot of the press releases coming out, CBP was not necessarily as forthright as we would have liked them to be, I think we've seen a lot of that, some of the language change in some of the recent articles I've seen them quoted in. You know, Assistant Commissioner Brenda Smith in a recent article did say that, you know, admit that CBP wasn't necessarily ready for this date. So that's a good understanding that, you know, no one was really ready for November 1st. So what is November 1st? Well, ACE is allowed and encouraged for electronic entry. So this is what Customs is saying. They're saying our programming will be ready for entry types 1, 11, 03, 51, 52 with the PGA data that is going to be mandatory on February 28th. And I think that's important, because one of the things that we were concerned about was we need enough testing time in production. That means it's fully out there, it's fully in production, it's not in a testing environment before February 28th, before any mandatory date is established. So we have from November 1st to February 28th in production to actually test and fully vet and make sure everything is working between November 1st and February 28th for those entry types and the mandatory PGA data. So what are the mandatory PGA data types? Well, that's the second bullet point here, February 28th. So we have the entry types, FDA, NHTSA, APHIS, the Lacey data must be filed in ACE, and ACS will no longer be available. And I have the rest of the entry types on the next slide, so we'll go through that. But that means, and I think it's extremely important, you must file those entry types in ACE, or you will not be able to achieve electronic entry. Let's just say that again. If you do not file in ACE on February 28th for 01, 11, 03, 51, 52, and electronic FDA, National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, and Lacey Act data, you will not be able to have an electronic entry. That means you will be doing paper. And I don't know how many of you have clients that are willing to wait to get their goods released to do a non-ABI paper entry. But I know in my experience, and over the 20 years I've been in ABI, my clients really haven't been excited about that process.
You know, and I think too that CBP is putting all the resources into ACE. You know, talk a little bit about the training. But so come February 28th, the resources are going to be limited for them to address paper entries. So the more people that are doing paper entries, that's just going to add delays to releases. It isn't going to be a day or two. Don't know what it is. It's an issue that we brought up from CBP. What is the backup plan? What type of resources? So, you know, we're here to encourage, get on electronic, because if you don't come February 28th, you and your customers may feel the impact of that in delays.
And I put the third bullet point, July 2016. That is the final rule for the rest of the PGAs. So in essence, we should all be in ACE for the rest of the PGA entry types and all of that data by July 2016. But we're going to focus today just on February 28th. So here's, I know a lot of us have seen this if you've gone to CBP, any CBP presentation in the last couple of months, or if you've gone to their website, you see this. And it's simply a good pictorial understanding of what the deadlines are. I would suggest that you put this somewhere where all of your staff understands this, and so that you know this is where we're going and this is why it's important. So what are the entry types? These are all of the entry types that essentially are automated today. So all of these entry types will have to be and are going to be mandatory on February 28th. So 01s are quota visa entries, our anti-dumping countervailing. So 01, 03, 11 are already in production today and have been for a number of years. There are very few issues with those. They have been, lots of volume have gone through on those. We have all of the other entry types are coming out. Some are in testing mode already, and some are coming out in the next couple of months. I encourage you to start testing for those that are coming out as soon as possible, and I do mention that later. But these are all of the entry types that are going to be mandatory on February 28th, which is essentially, again, all of your automated entry types. So you need to understand that by February 28th, if you're filing automated entry summaries, you're going to be required to file those in ACE. So filers will only be permitted to file in ACE and no longer permitted to file in the automated commercial system for all electronic entries and associated entry summaries for these three, FDA, NHTSA, and Lacey. So what does that mean? Are there any exceptions? Because this is always the question. Okay, so I have all of these entry types. I have these three, which are some of the biggest three. We know that roughly 30% of all PGA data is subject to FDA. So that's by far the largest PGA that's subject to that imports are subject to, followed by NHTSA. So those are huge, the two largest impacted PGAs. And then the Lacey Act data, is fairly impactful too, and that's usually on the entry summary today. So PGA, for all the entry types, there are no known exceptions for filers other than reverting to paper-based filing. We have seen nothing from CBP to indicate that there will be any type of exceptions, any type of forgiveness, any type of workaround for filing in ACS. We know that one of the driving factors in these deadlines is the need for CBP to turn off ACS. ACS was an antiquated system 15 years ago. It is a very antiquated system today and requires an enormous amount of resources from CBP to actually keep running. So one of the driving factors for them to pay for ACE is to turn this old legacy system off. So they need to get to a point where they can turn major pieces of this, if not off, restricting access to this. So there will be an element of ACS that will have to run. That is true. And I hear a lot of people say they can never turn it off because of all the legacy data and all these underlying financial systems and all these other supporting. I understand that. But just like when you have two concurrent systems running, when you go from an old system to a new system, you're going to run that old system, but you're going to severely limit who can actually have access to that old system. Why? Because then you can limit the number of licenses that you have to pay for. You can limit the number of servers that you have to have supporting that old system. You're going to limit the cost that you have associated with that old system. And you're going to try to do that until it gets to nothing. And that's exactly what CBP is trying to do. They're trying to get ACS costs to nothing and put everything in ACE because it actually is more stable and can support better functionality for the trade, but also within CBP. ACS is very arcane, very structural, and ACE allows them so much more functionality. So they want to move everything to ACE for financial reasons, for functionality reasons, and because that's the future. So there is nothing, and I know COAC had made recommendations to allow exceptions. to outline a what-if policy. And I know CBP has encouraged, or NCBFAA has also encouraged CBP to do that for filers, because we know things happen, and there are going to be instances where we're going to have a situation where, what if a software vendor goes under? What if a software package fails? And that, affects a major portion of our industry. What happens then? And we'll continue to have, I'm sure, those conversations with CBP moving forward. But today, there's nothing. For PGAs, all PGAs are going to be requirements at time of entry or entry summary will be met through ACE unless you have trade filers who are required or elect to file entirely in paper. Some right now you have some of these crazy FDA programs where you have to be certified, and if you aren't certified, you have to file in paper. So there will be exceptions for that, but that'll be with FDA. The data is currently provided to agencies in paper form, and with the concurrence of the administration, they get a waiver. CPSC has a pilot program, and they have a concurrence from the administration that they will not be rolling that out until 2016 and 2017. There are some other PGAs that are going or have a waiver from the administration for slightly different timelines. They have to have regulatory amendments to actually collect the data in an electronic format. So I know the BIC and the administration are working through some of those. But also, information in a paper-based format can be filed through the document imaging system. So we know that several software packages do have some issues with the document imaging system. And NCBFAA has voiced, as well as COAC has voiced, some concern with the document imaging system and the capabilities, because we know that it's only being used less than 5%. And once you ramp that up, we are concerned that there will be issues with storage capability and definitely volume. We're concerned with the volume. And I know COAC shared that with the Office of Information Technology, the Assistant Commissioner, and we're hoping that that concern will be addressed. So essentially, no exceptions. So we have to get serious about this. I thought it would be good to talk a little bit about the basic development process and timeline. And this is a slide that we put together at the NCBFAA to talk to some of our partners. We talked to the COAC with this. We talked to some of our Capitol Hill partners. We talked to the BIC. We talked to some of the folks at CBP, because this was a good high-level understanding of how long it takes really to go through a basic development process. Software development is really complex and can take a long time. And you can see through all of the puzzle pieces there. We've outlined a standard development process and then one with PGAs. And I saved you from having to do the math in the gray boxes there. The standard really, for a standard program, it's about 82 weeks from very start to the very end of the process. To go from a very beginning program and get that rolled out. And then with a PGA, a typical process would take about 105 weeks. And that's really based on a survey that we did with our members, with some software folks, through the TSN, through the NCBFAA, going out to the software integration subcommittee, and as well as our own automated subcommittee with the customs committee, and talking with some of our importers to say, how long does it take you to do this? And it's an average timeline. And we were quite shocked that it took this long on average for everyone. Everyone thinks, oh my gosh, it always takes us so long to do software, and really it's quite average. So when you look at that and you think, okay, with a PGA, which all of these programs other than your straight entry summary, 105 weeks, that's 2 years. That's 2 years to do this from start to finish. Really, you should be well into the blow process with your software vendor. You really should have a lot of this done. And for the basic entry summary process, you really should be way at the end here where you have this rollout. You should be way into this process with your software vendor. If you're not in the rollout process, you should be training and getting that rolled out in your shops right now. Your client should also be part of this conversation and process, especially if there is an EDI feed. And I'm going to talk a little bit more in depth to these slides in a little bit. But your client, it's critical. And for the importers out there, you need to understand each part of these processes, because I know, and CBP has told us, that they are picking up the phone and calling our importer clients. And they're saying, are you filing an ACE? And why not? Why isn't your customs broker filing an ACE? And if you get that call, I want you to take the slide out and start talking to them about where your customs broker is in this process and where you are in this process as well, because this is one of the reasons why we are where we are. Also, Sandy, I know, will go into much more detail on this on Friday, and I encourage you all to get on the webinar with her. She's absolutely fabulous and understands the specifications and implementation guides better than anyone I know. She can tell you that when these implementation guides come out, which is what each PGA puts out to say, this is what you must program in your system, buried inside those implementation guides are specifications, yes, for coding, but also it tells us new information that we need from our clients and new processes that we must have to implement their requirements now. And guess what? They change. Not the whole thing, but little pieces of it change. Several weeks ago, FDA, they published their implementation guide. Great. All of our programmers took that and said, we have to start working on this immediately, because guess what? I don't have 105 weeks to get this done. I got to get this done immediately. So they started programming. And then several weeks later, through a CSMS message, a custom email-generated message, FDA published a new implementation guide and said, oh, we're changing a specification. And that was the first notification that we had that they were doing that, which is an issue for us and something that we've brought up both to CBP and to the PGAs and to the BIC. So if you're getting those calls, to my importer friends out there, if you're getting those calls, dig out this slide, feel free to share it with CBP and help them understand some of our challenges.
Yeah, and and I have to give Cindy a lot of credit on this slide. We started talking about this about a year ago because, understandably the government was looking at it from their side. The programming that they needed to do, and what we really wanted to convey to them was, what happens with this raid? What do our programmers need? What communication do we need to have with our clients? What communication do the importers need to get from their suppliers? So any type of change that goes on has a cascading effect, and it's very, very long. So just because they make a small change, they can't just think about their side. They have to think about the whole trade side of it. So we started bringing this up about a year ago, and again, this is a great tool for you to be using as a broker to find out where are you in this particular process. Sit down with your software provider and find out where they are. When is your rollout? What do you have ready for training and everything? So this is a great, great slide.
So this is my favorite slide of the whole presentation. Remember this? Standard 82 weeks, PGA 105. We only have 20 weeks left before February 29th. 20 weeks. Are you ready? Is your software ready? Are your staff ready? If you're an importer, are you ready? Are you ready to interact with your clients or with your brokers on an automated basis in 20 weeks? Because that's where we all have to be. So I'll let you all digest that for a moment before I ask, where should you be today? And this is my recommendation. This is Cindy Allen, affiliated with no one. This is Cindy Allen's recommendation just based on my background and my experience. Really, you should be filing all of your entry summary types 01, 03, and 11 all in ACE today. If you are not filing them in ACE today, you need to immediately figure out how you can get there immediately, because that functionality is fairly stable. I'm not going to say you aren't going to have any problems, because that's never the case when you roll out any type of functionality at all.
But it's, I think the point is it's better to have those issues now as opposed to waiting to February 28th when X amount are doing the same thing and there's questions. You know, the resources, more resources are going to be available today than they are going to be on February 28th, and that's where I encourage you, get on it, do it. You know, 1s, 3s, and 11s now. It's been tested. You know, I think over 64% of 1s, 3s, and 11s are filed in ACE today. You know, the thinking is it should be 100% today. So that's what we're saying. If you're not there right now, you're behind.
Yes, you're definitely behind. And I'm talking on this slide just to the entry summary and release functionality. I'll touch on the PGA functionality next, but for all non-PGA releases, I think about 33, a third of your non-PGA releases should be filed in ACE today at minimum, and you should be adding another third every 6 weeks, period, or as each PGA pilot is added and available. And I know a lot of you were waiting for the RLF capabilities. I understand that. It's hard to do, you know, one type of release in one port and another type of release over here if you're doing RLF and another type over there. I get that, but now that the RLF capability is out, you really should be looking at this as how can I ramp up as quickly as possible. A lot of people are having problems with release. A lot of people. There are lots of issues with it. Why? Because less than 4% of all releases are filed in ACE today. And we are only going to uncover the problems if we start filing in volume. And I want those problems to be identified 20 weeks out, 19 weeks out, 18 weeks out, rather than 3 weeks out and 2 weeks out, because then it's going to be a complete mess trying to go to customs, trying to go to DHS, trying to go to the White House, telling them this is going to be a disaster. You need to cancel this date in 2 weeks, because they're going to say, why didn't you come to us sooner? Where is the proof sooner? But if we can tell them, you know, 4 weeks from now, look, we have tried. We have 50% of all of our releases in ACE, and we can only affect 10% of the releases. 25 to 45 or whatever that number is get canceled because we have problems with the functionality, then that's a whole different conversation. We did recently ask CBP to start keeping track of how many releases we're filing in ACE that get canceled and then have to go to ACS to be released, because we think that is an important statistic that we need to keep track of and that they need to keep track of, because that is going to be important, an important criteria for success. We've recently started talking about what are our important criteria elements for success. And that's something I think we're going to be looking at as an association, as the automation committee, so that we can say and have a proactive conversation with customs to say, this is what we think success criteria is. But we need to have that now, and we simply can't do that with 4% of the releases done. So we're being a little selfish in saying we need more releases done in ACE. Get all of those non-PGA releases done. Get all of those vanilla type of releases in ACE. Get all of those issues with release identified, and more importantly, feed those up to your customs committee, feed those up to your automation committee, send them in to the NCBFAA so that we can identify them to our appropriate committees and then on to customs or to the TSN, to the Software Integration Committee. They are actively tracking some of these. They also have Monday morning, and they're spread out, and I know Sandy will have much more information on these, but there are calls that happen that we can start identifying some of these issues. And as they pile up, you know, Customs doesn't want this date to be a failure either, because it will be a very visible failure for them. But we need to have some sort of success or some sort of failure that is actually proven along.
Yeah, and in addition to going up, you know, nationally, if you will, to the National Brokers Association, you should also look local to your local associations to see what other issues the other brokers in your area experience, but also be reaching out to the local CBP people. We're all training together. We're looking together. It's a new system for them, but it would be a great opportunity for you and your association to be working with the local customs folks, finding out what issues, what are they seeing, what are you sending, what do you think you're seeing, what do they think that they're seeing, et cetera, and have that dialogue on a local level as well as the national level.
Good point. And then for all the other entry types, file as soon as possible when it's released. And I know these are going to be sent out, and your software programmer is going to have a very short time period to get this actually programmed. But we're hoping that they won't be too much changed from the current functionality, so they'll be able to get these programmed fairly quickly. So PGAs, this is the PGA portion, and this is really what we're concerned with. You know, the entry summary and the release, I think we're less concerned. I'm a little bit concerned with the release functionality, but I think the more that we actually test it and the more that we actually use it, those issues with the software will become evident and be fixed. This is where I get really concerned, and this is where I think that most of us are concerned. When those deadlines were set, you know, years and years ago, to be quite honest, no one anticipated that all of these PGAs would be rolled into it. And I think that our heartburn, you know, the fire really comes when we start adding these PGAs, even though it's been scaled down from the 47 and, you know, the 15, and now we're just at the 3. This is where we're most concerned. There are a lot of things that can go wrong here. So this first link goes to a document. I'm going to go through in a little bit of detail here. Also, you want to go to the CATER with the IGs, and there are various Federal Register notices that outline all of the pilots that are being sent out. So you'll get these. It'll give you the links to these, but let's go into, this is the requirements for partner government agency information. And as you can see, it goes through all of the agencies, the 15 or so that are automated, but we're going to focus on the 3 that are pertinent for the February 28th deadline. So I know this may be a little bit hard to see, but I wanted to outline this because it has some great information on it. So the Lacey Act. So USDA, the Lacey Act, we all know. So it's in pilot right now. So this should be something that you're looking at. Here's the form number. So this tells us a couple of things. How is Customs actually going to collect the data? Are they going to collect it in a message set, so completely automated through ABI, or are they going to collect it via a form, an automated form, document imaging system through ABI as well? Now, document imaging system, some people get confused. There are several different layers of document imaging system. Right now, we have, you can email, if Customs has requested a document, you can email that document, and that fulfills the document imaging system. You can send it through ABI if you are hooked up with the document imaging system through ABI. The best way to do this is through ABI. That is the goal, is all of it will be through ABI, because we want these, one, you want it through the system of record, because if there is ever a legal issue, you want that to be part of the system of record so that there is no question going down, looking downstream. You want there to be no question that you sent it in, so there should be, ABI records going back and forth, and we all know that, if it's through ACE, it's paperless, so that will all be part of that, that one system, and, email is hard to track. It's a person-to-person unless you have a group email to group email, but that's kind of hard to track and hard to drag into our systems for record-keeping purposes. So I recommend that you get into the ABI document imaging system as soon as possible so that you can continue or so that you can streamline your handling of these documents.
And so check with your software provider to find out where they are in that program, because sometimes it is separate, and they may say, well, you're going to have to email it now. And again, I know with a lot of the business moving into the Cs, there's been some question about that. Who's requesting the document? Are they seeing the document? And the DIS should answer all that. So find out where your programmers are in that.
Yes. Okay, so Lacey Act, they're going to go to a message set. So your programmer is going to have to figure out how to do a message set. And I would encourage you to work with your programmers where they can. Now, some programmers, due to the tight timelines that they have, are pretty much just programming, here's the form, fill it out, and we'll transmit it, behind the scenes. And they're trying to streamline that. A good program will always try to take the data elements that you have input into your system and pull those data elements out to feed the type of transmission that Customs is looking for. So that's like the ultimate end goal for any type of program that you're looking for in the end. It's putting that data in once and filling multiple data transmissions to Customs and to the PGA. So, I know a lot of programs that do that in the end, and that's really what the end game is. However, do know that each agency sometimes has different definitions for the same term. So you have to remember that. So importer may not be importer for USDA and Customs, so you have to remember the differences and understand, and that's where these implementation guides come in handy. You have to go read them, you have to understand what the definitions are, and be careful that you're applying them correctly.
And I think it highlights a big thing there, Cindy, is the data elements, the new data elements are going to be needed, and those are in the implementation guides in the CATIR, and we as brokers need to communicate that to our customers so you can start getting that particular data now. Because they are different. They may be required on a form, they may not be, but really take a look at the implementation guides and the CATIR to find out what your customers are going to need to provide in this new environment.
Yep. So the FDA, and this just says working group, it says data collected through OGA feed. So we've seen a couple of different pilots come out from the FDA. So we know that this was put together, and it's just a very general, so that we've seen, the medical devices have come out. There's another one for the food that has come out. This is going to be complicated. I'm concerned about NHTSA. We have some concerns. I'll talk about that in a minute. But this, I am very concerned about FDA. It's complicated enough as it is, but now we're seeing them get down into some detail that I don't think any of us really anticipated. The good thing is it is a message set, so it hopefully will build on a lot of the information that our systems currently already collect. But like for the medical devices, we aren't used to transmitting a lot of information that they're asking for the medical devices now. And many of the importers are used to dealing directly with FDA for these medical devices, and now they have to give us that information. And we have to have a different kind of conversation with our importers, and our importers are having a different kind of interface with us to give us that information. So this is a new type of information, and there are, how are you as an importer, to my importer friends out there, how are you going to get that information to me as a customs broker in a secure format? And how am I going to take that information and keep that in my system and get that to Customs? And am I going to do that on a transactional basis, or am I going to do that on a client level basis? Am I going to keep that in my system and pull that, on a part number basis, or am I going to have to call you every time? So that depends on the type of business that you have, and it depends on the type of system that you have. But that's a conversation that I'm going to have with every one of my FDA medical device clients. And if you have one, great. If you have 25, a little bit bigger undertaking.
And whether, a data element is optional or conditional.
Right.
And some have said that even if it's optional, if you provide that particular data element, it may increase the probability of a faster release. So do you consider that an optional data element? So it may be in somebody's best interest, even though it's optional, to provide that to expedite the release of the cargo.
Yes, we all are very, very familiar with that with FDA. They have, that one data element that they all say, oh, this is conditional, but we all know if we don't put it, it's going to be a doc required. So we all just put it in there because we know, and I have talked to customs many times, or FDA many times, and said, why don't you just put that in as mandatory so we all know it? Mm-hmm. If you really want it, just say it's mandatory. It'd be easier for everyone. But they said, well, we can't make it mandatory because our regulations don't state that it's mandatory. Oh.
And I think these are some of the things that the pilots are going to generate,
right.
and identify some of these things. So what you see today may be optional. Best practices may be a mandatory without changing the regulations.
Right. And NHTSA, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, okay, the declaration, the HS7, goes by message set. The rest of the information that they have can be supported through document imaging system. And we'll talk a little bit about the NHTSA, because it's a case where, remember when I said when we started building, ACE, we all wanted to build that mansion. This is a case where, NHTSA looked at this and said, I want, not only do I want to know it's a bumper, I want to know if it goes on the right side or the left side, and I want to know if it, is undermounted or overmounted. And, I remember having a conversation with an automotive manufacturer, and they said, it doesn't matter. Why does it matter if it's a left side or a right side? We build ours where they can go either way. So what if it's universal? What if it's universal bumper? So it's, or right and left tire. Well, you can put a tire on any wheel. So it's, it's a case where we continually, have to question, why do you need this information? And do you really need this at time of release? Do you absolutely have to have this at time of release? We understand there are safety requirements, but do you need this at time of release? And I think that's kind of where, we are asking Jeff, to in his role on the BIC, in our partnership with Customs, with CBP, to say, can you please ask these questions on our behalf, because it's a little ridiculous. The rest of these really are customs forms. So I'm just going to go through them really quickly. These are all things that we would send in support of an entry or support of a release. And they are all going to either remain in paper as a softwood lumber certificate, which really kind of surprised me, in document imaging systems. So they're all of the labels, all of the certificates, declaration by importers, all of those things that the beef certificate, the petroleum certificate. These are all of the free trade agreements. Right now, they are not required to be in a message set, but if we are asked for them in support of an entry or support of a release, we have the ability to provide these via the document imaging system, so that we can continue to keep the entry or entry summary in a paperless format, which I am all for, even though this is going to be a little more complicated, because we all know that the document imaging system does require some data to be wrapped around it. I think in the end this is going to be an advancement for us. So with that, what I wanted to do is kind of break out each of these elements of the development process to kind of go through where you really need to focus from a very high level in each of these. So the implementation guides. If you have a software programmer, they're most likely well along this path. At least I hope they are. And if they are not, you're in trouble. I mean, just basically you're in trouble. We know that we've seen a couple of the software vendors that have gotten out of the business. They just said, this is too much, I can't keep up, I'm not making money, I'm out. If you are in that type of process, you need to immediately have a conversation with your ABI client rep. You need to immediately have a conversation with Custodes, because you're going to be in a world of hurt, because there's very little chance you're going to be making any of the deadlines in ACE. The implementation guides. But that being said, most of the software vendors that I know are well along in this process. I'm not seeing any that I'm worried about not making it to a deadline. They're all nervous about some of these PGAs and all of the changes that continue to happen, but I'm not seeing any that, you know, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, they don't have release done, or they don't have a major piece done. I'm not seeing any of that. So I think we're, you know, the software industry seems to be stable at this point, which I think is good for our industry and for the importing industry. The implementation guides really contain vital information. We were at a customs committee meeting, and I have to give Myra Reynolds a shout out from John S. James Company, because she did a fabulous presentation to us about the work that she did with NHTSA. The HS7 form, which has been around for ages and ages and ages. I think, you know, in the 30-plus years I've been in the industry, that form has been around. You know, we used to fill it out with carbon paper in between it, and then we were all excited because it went to, you know, a checkbox on the automated ABI release. You know, it went from a checkbox to, you know, almost backwards, and it went from, you know, these 20 possible data elements and generally a checkbox to over 200 data elements. And the instructions went from just a few pages to over 50 pages. And it really highlighted the need to go through these implementation guides, because that's where all the information came from. That's really what happened, because she had to go through the implementation guides and then reference back to the regulations to understand the references, and then go work with NHTSA, and then go to her clients to say, oh my gosh, this is everything you're now going to have to provide to me. We have asked now CBP and the other government agencies to go through that process, to give that information to us. But do you have the time to wait for that? I know I don't. And I don't know, Jeff, if your company does.
No.
You know, because we don't know when that's going to happen. It'd be great if they all provided it tomorrow and said, oh, here it is. Great. But we all know, you know, Myra said it took her 3 to 4 weeks to do that, of doing nothing else but that. So if we all have to do that, we all better start now, even with the 3 agencies that we have. And knowing that we all have to keep in mind that those are changing. So every time something comes out, we need to know, oh, God, I have to go back and I have to look at that and I have to see if anything changes. Not just the programming aspect, but is a data element changing? And then if a data element is changing, do I need to tell my staff? And then do I need to communicate that to my importers? Because my importers then need to take steps. So the implementation guides, I think, is what we as customs brokers really have to take from this piece of the puzzle. The next piece is the testing. So our software vendor has done this programming, and now they need to test it. So some of us actually are, you know, tapped to help them test it. We have to make sure that it works, and we have to make sure that it works with our system. And each software vendor typically has more than one version of their software out there. Most software has between 5 and 9 versions of their software going at any time. Why is that? Because customer A can only take, updates to their software twice a year. Customer B wants it every time they have a new update, and customer C wants it 4 times a year. And customer D, well, they have special programming needs. So they have a version that's all their own. And customer E, well, they have a special program too, but they want it 4 times a year, but not the same as customer B. So, they have all of these different versions going. So they need to test each one. And when they're done testing, if there's any bugs, they need someone to retest that. So you have to have dedicated individuals that can test the software when it's rolled out. This will take time from your production, and it'll take time from your clients. And it'll be part of the cost of doing business, because I don't know, in my 30 years in the business, I don't know any client who has ever paid me to test software that I've purchased because I have a need for it, unless they've required me to get it. So this is something that you have to understand is going to be a costly process. And our importers, I know this is always one of those touchy conversations, and it's touchy conversation, because we start getting into, oh my gosh, is this antitrust, but I'm not talking specifics, but we all have to realize, and our importers have to realize, our importer and exporter friends have to realize, this is costly for us. And this is not something that generally we are getting a return for until, even if we do, much later in this process. It's the cost of doing our business.
And just something to keep in mind in the testing, as Cindy said, it's going to take resources from your company, but just make sure that you have the proper contacts at your software company when you run into a problem, that they have the resources available, because it isn't always our software providers issue. It may be a CBP issue, and we have to go up through the lines of communication, which may take some time. So when you're getting on this, the software programmers are spending a lot of time, a lot of energy programming with all the changes that are coming in too. But want to make sure that there's that environment there where you can go in and ask questions quickly, because again, we all have to remember that we're trying to get our shipments, our customers' shipments cleared as quickly as possible. We can't wait 1, 2, 4 days for a reply back.
And then for importer and exporter clients, this is vital. Client communication is important, especially when there's new information needed. So the NHTSA is a great example. How much more information is required, because all of those NHTSA affected clients now have to go back in their supply chain and get that information. And because of the complexity of the supply chain, we saw this with the 10+2, the ISF. And that was just 10 static data elements. 10 static data elements. How complicated it was to go back. Now, multiply that times industry-based information for all of your suppliers, and know that specific information for specific product lines have to be obtained. It's going to be a very massive undertaking for some of your clients, especially if they have multiple vendors in multiple parts of the world. And many of our clients are starting to go into underdeveloped parts of the world, and where communication is not necessarily the best, and really try to pull that information forward with enough clarity that we can get that information at time of release, before time of release, which is important. So we need to review the information that's needed. We need to identify with our clients what it is so that they can take that information and then go out in their supply chain and figure out where that is, and then bring it back to us. So again, I just wanted to reiterate, we've asked CBP and the BIC and each PGA to publish trade-friendly guidelines, but really, you need to start on this now, because we don't know the timeline for those. So the end-to-end process, this is not just a computer change. We all know that now. I think that a lot of people thought, this is computer, don't worry about it, my software will handle it. We all know that there's an additional need for data, and we all know, how are we going to obtain that data? How are we going to get it? Is it automated? Are we going to need additional FTEs? Because guess what? All of that data for NHTSA, if it's not automated for our clients, and all of those additional elements for FDA that I've never had to input before, and as we roll from February forward to all of those other agencies that collect those forms directly from the importer today, we're going to have to input that. If we don't have that in an automated format, and I now have to put that information in, the meat inspection form is a perfect example. That's something that we didn't necessarily see as a customs broker. That went directly from the importer or the truck driver to the meat inspection. And now I have to input all of that information in. I never had to contemplate that before. So now I have to contemplate putting that information in. And I have to contemplate how long it's going to take me to do that. And how many people is it going to take me to do that? And how am I going to make money? Because let's face it, people, we're in this business to make money. I still have to make a profit, or I'm not going to be in business. I'm not a charitable organization. And, everyone's in this to make money. So we have to make sure that we're making this from a business decision as well, and having those uncomfortable conversations with our clients who now have not only the additional information that they have to provide to the other government agency, knowing that information is going to be looked at time of release, and they have another process that Customs and the PGA are going to look at time of release, and that information is going to be targeted. But more labor is required to do this. So it may be more efficient for Customs. It may be more efficient for the other government agency, but it certainly has not provided efficiencies on our side yet. Now, it may in the future. It may be, and we're excited that we aren't going to have to do this in 47 different programs. That is the goal, but this is not adding efficiencies. And you'll know, and you'll see if you look back, Customs, CBP, has stopped saying, that this is an efficient process, that we're adding efficiencies, because I think we've all kind of realized that we aren't.
And, not just to look at the resources that you're going to need, as Cindy mentioned, the FTEs, but also, can your servers have the capacity to handle this? Do your data lines have the capacity to handle a 10 megabyte file, 2 and 4? Can your servers hold that much data? And I know that this is some of the things that some of our members are running into. And again, rather know it now so that when the date comes that you're not running around trying to increase your data line capacity or buy new servers.
Yes. And, integrating with your other systems. You have to think about that too. If I am taking more data in, what are the impacts to my other systems? If my information is coming from a manifest, and getting that information, and that's flowing into my brokerage system, how is that being impacted? Do I need to increase or change those? Do my transaction to my billing systems need to change at all? So you have to start thinking about the other systems that you have, and those integrations that you have, and how they need to change in the process. The importer-exporter programming. So, do you have automated or EDI feeds from your clients, and do they need to be updated and tested? And do fee schedules need to be updated and implemented? And then how many clients do you have that you have EDI feeds? Large brokers have hundreds and hundreds of EDI feeds that they now have to go back and reprogram and retest with each of their clients. Smaller brokers too, as we have become more automated, more data flows. Every time you have a change, it impacts your business in a more significant way. So, and for the importers and exporters out there, start thinking about this. Even though if your broker has not come to talk to you about your data feeds, you need to start going to your programmers and saying, hey, there's going to be a need here. I'm going to need to start thinking about, I'm going to come to you between now and February 28th. If you are subject to one of those 3 government agencies, you're going to need to change your EDI feed in some way, shape, or form to your customs broker. And if you are part of the other agencies between now and July, you want to start having those conversations and maybe get it into your budget for next year. If you're in the budget process right now, you want to get that into your budget for next year because you're going to have an EDI change for then as well.
And it isn't just the the EDI between the importer and the broker, but also between suppliers and getting that particular information. If importers are currently receiving that information on an automated basis, preparing them for that.
Yeah. All the way from the origin point.
Yes, yes.
It's getting to that point. And end-to-end testing. I kind of put this here because it's kind of the end point. I wanted to talk a little bit about the pilot. Like I said, Customs is picking up the phone and calling our importer friends and saying, why aren't you participating in the pilot? Why aren't you doing that? There's currently, when I did these 7 pilots out, if you're a customs broker, what's your strategy? Well, I would say your strategy should be pick the one that most impacts your clients and begin participating. You don't have to do all of your transactions. You can just do 1. You can do 2. You can start very small, understand what it is, babysit that 1 transaction. Recruit a client. Go to your most trusted client, the ones who are forward-thinking, and let Customs know. Call the local port that you're going to be testing in and say, this is my test client. I'm going to be piloting. I just want to let you know. We may have some issues because we have heard some, quite frankly, horror stories where they're trying to be part of this pilot. They're working on these releases for days, and they just, they have local CBP on the phone. They have the ABI client rep. They have the software vendor, and you're working for days, to try to get this through, to figure out what the issue is, and the freight arrives. And you have to get that freight released, so you cancel the ACE entry and you do it in ACS. If you have that proactive conversation with your local CBP office, they understand that, and they will be lenient, and they will know, okay, I get why they're trying to do this. If you have that conversation and they know what you're doing, and your client understands, okay, we get that you're trying to move forward with the programming, it works very well. Some of the pilots are going okay. Some of them are not. Some of the software is, that's why we're seeing a lot of the up and down of the system. They're taking the system down to do little fixes. That's also, unfortunately, why we're seeing some of the implementation guides change, because they've realized not only will something not work, they don't need the information, but maybe the programming needs change. This isn't quite working the way we expected it. And because they have such a tight timeline, they can't afford to do a standard drop. We used to do, when I was with CBP, we would do fixes on a monthly basis. Wait until a monthly basis and do all the fixes at once. They can't afford to do that anymore. With 20 weeks left, they can't afford to wait on a monthly basis. So they're doing them every couple of days to get those up and running so people can continue to test. And then, add a pilot every 6 weeks. If you are subject to all 3 of those, you have clients that are subject to all 3. And let's face it, if you're a customs broker, you probably have a client who is subject to all 3 of those. Do 1 every 6 weeks. Do 1, figure it out, get it going, wait, 4 to 6 weeks. Add the other one, get that one going, do it, and then add the last one, get that one going, and do it. Do not wait. Do not wait until the end, because you will be sorry. Training. There's new data elements, and I don't know about you, but in my experience, our staff don't do well trying to figure things out themselves. There will be a need to train. And while there's all this uncertainty, you're going to have a new system, you're going to have new data elements, you're going to have clients calling you saying, why are you asking me for this? You never asked me for this before. What's this new fee on my bill? I don't understand this. You want to make sure that your employees really know the ins and outs. Take the time. This is a costly time to be in our business, and I understand that. But take the time to train your staff. That's where you can differentiate yourself as a good service provider if your employees have the information that they can communicate with your clients on an educated basis, and they can make good decisions in their day-to-day process. That's going to get you through this trying period more than anything else, because there's going to be issues. We're all going to have problems. We're all going to make mistakes. Something is going to go wrong. But if our employees at least can talk intelligently about what's going on and they know what they're talking about, chances are we're going to keep our clients and we're going to keep our employees, because that's really where I think I've seen in my experience where we have employees leave because they don't feel like they have all the tools or all the necessary information to do their job.
I think as February 28th gets closer, the level of anxiety is going to increase exponentially. And, and amongst many different parties. It isn't just going to be about CBP and ourselves and the importers, but also all the PGAs and trying to get things done. The concern is not getting something released timely. So starting now, the anxiety level for everybody is a little bit low, and I think the longer that people have to, play with the product, get to know the product, train on the product, the much easier transition it's going to be.
Yeah, I agree. So, and lastly, rollout. I want to say that, brokers and forwarders have already seen a reduced availability of our ABI client reps. We saw this with the AIR AMS rollout, and the longer we wait to ramp up, the less time each of these individuals are going to have to dedicate to ensuring and working through those problems. Implement as soon as possible, even if it means multiple changes. And I know that's more costly and it's harder for everyone, but I will tell you that if my choice has always been do it now, do it now, do it now. If I have to change, a small change at this point is better than not implementing or waiting, because, getting to know the process, as Jeff mentioned, getting to know the system, getting to know the, contacting my clients, getting the information in is going to be better than, and making a small tweak is going to be better than trying to get this off the ground. There's a famous saying, it's always easier to do a course correction after the ship has left the dock. You can do all the changes you want, but until that ship leaves the dock, it's just all, it's all navigation. So, get the ship away from the dock. You need to get going on this. And we continue to tell CBP that the ABI client rep availability is a major issue, and I can tell you COAC identified this in their recommendations as well. We continue to identify this as a serious issue within COAC. So, this is one thing that you can control, is to get going as soon as you can. So what is the NCBFA doing, and what can we do to help? So we started doing a weekly call over a year ago, and pulled in a number of our members who are on COAC, who are on the ITDS Board of Directors, who are part of the Trade Support Network and the Trade Leadership Council, really to find out what's going on, what everybody's hearing, how can we come at it with the same message, and how can we properly train, and easier for us to identify issues across multiple lines, whether it be with a specific PGA, a rollout, whoever it may be. And I think that the NCBFA has had a well-coordinated approach with all the government agencies. We're talking regularly with CBP and with DHS. Weekly meetings with assistant commissioners, executive directors, and the commissioners' offices, telling them what we see, what some of the issues are, and offering assistance to reach out, to our members to get them engaged in the pilots. Regularly in conversation with the Department of Homeland Security,
But also we have some great representatives, Cindy being one, Amy Magnus another, and Vince Jacopella on COAC, who are looking at this issue as well. They are the advisory committee to CBP. We've had a number of people who are on the Trade Support Network, and it's really the advisory committee to CBP on ACE. And a lot of these people, our folks and importers, have been engaged in this process for 15 years now. We've seen changes in some of the government leadership. Some of them have changed, and I think that we have been the consistent participants in that. So we're regularly talking to them, making recommendations. We've written a few letters to the commissioner on this, just to make sure that our concerns are heard and hearing directly from the trade community, not only on ACE, but on ITDS and the PGAs. The BIC is the Border Interagency Executive Council, and this was set up after the President's Executive Order 13659 in February 2014. And as Cindy said, this is something that we're very excited about. It's there to streamline the process to be able to provide one data set to all the government agencies, facilitate trade. This is actually something that I know the ITDS Board of Directors lobbied in the Bush administration, had a letter, but none of the government agencies followed that. Now we have the new one by December 2016. So the BIC is set up into the different subgroups. They've got a policy group. We're involved in the external engagement, so there's a lot of dialogue between us, other associations, trade associations, directly to CBP, DHS, and the Department of Commerce. The Department of Commerce is actually chairing the external engagement. And so it's been a lot of back and forth, reaching out, and great discussions on that. So we appreciate all of BIC, and we continue to talk to them. There's actually a meeting next week, again, to continue dialogue on that. Last week, the NCBFA was up on Capitol Hill, regularly keeping Congress updated on what's going on with ACE and ITDS. And you know, years ago we were there. We pushed for funding for this, but we want to make sure they're aware and make sure that they're aware of our concerns. They were very much aware of the November 1st concern, and now we want to make sure that February 28th, Cindy said, we have a successful transition. You know, our definition may be different than some of the government agencies, and we want to make sure that we're aligned on that. So our hope is that we will continue to have outreaches like this. Always available is an email address, ace@ncbfaa.org, if you have questions. Friday we're having another webinar, really getting down into the details. Sandy Cody from OHL, who's been dramatically involved with this, and can highlight issues and problems and what, as a broker, you should be looking at on the ACE portal, types of reports that can assist you in managing your business. And we will continue to do that. We will continue, and we will also tape these sessions so people can come back to them later. But if you're just getting on ACE, it might be a good thing to get on that, to listen to what other people are experiencing. We're also proposing to CBP and the BIC that the pilots, all those people, get together and share some of their learning experiences across the various pilots, but also to other members in the community who are going to be getting on to these PGA message sets. But you know, we need your input, we need your feedback on any of these issues. We're also there to assist our members in getting on. You know, we can answer your questions, we can give you feedback from our members that are on it, but you know, we're there to support you. So you know, send the emails, ace@ncbfaa.org. I know we have some questions set up here if we have a few minutes, but if not, what we can do is take those questions, and CC can confirm that, but we'll get back to you and post them out. And we've lost our questions.
Yes, we've lost our questions, CC.
No.
Hold on one second. We're just going to get the questions up. Great.
Okay, we have quite a few questions, and whatever we can't get to, we'll try to group them and send them out in the next couple of days, because there's quite a few here. I saw this quite a few times. Will the deadline be delayed? We talked about this before the webinar. My personal opinion, Cindy Allen's personal opinion, I don't think they'll delay the core. I think that the entry summary and the release, I think that because it's been out there for so long, I don't think that they will delay it. I really don't. I think that we've had lots of time to send entry summary. I think we've had lots of time to participate in that. I think, that they will be extremely resistant to any type of delay for that. I also know that there was a lot of resistance to the current delay. I know that it was an extremely difficult discussion among the assistant deputies at the deputy level. So it will be an extremely controversial type of discussion. I think that if they delay it at all, I think it will be on a PGA by PGA decision, and I think that the PGAs will have to make the case themselves and or with the trade that there are just too many issues, problems, or hurdles that, with the functionality going forward. And I really think that that will be maybe the case.
Yeah, so I know some folks were waiting for ACE to be complete, if you will, and I think we just have to call it core for all the PGA programming to be done. And so I would recommend, this is just Jeff talking, get on cargo release. The PGAs will come. We don't know when they're going to come, so don't wait for all the PGAs to be on there. Do the ACE entry summary and do ACE cargo release without the PGAs right now, so you can get those things filed. And then, we're going to see what happens with the PGAs.
Do we have, somebody asked a question about the air manifest. I will tell you, I was with DHL when the air manifest came out, and there were huge issues with that. We did see, Customs had, I think, a very rude awakening with that, and did dedicate a lot of resources to understanding what happened with that. It was an extremely complicated rollout. I can tell you that I understood that from both sides of the aisle, from CBP's perspective and from the broker's perspective and the forwarder's perspective. But a lot of the issues that they saw were actually not necessarily with the air AMS functionality itself. It was with how it interacted with all of the other functionality that it had to connect to. Now, don't get me wrong, there were some issues with the air AMS programming itself, but the major issues were how it interacted with all the other programs. There was also an issue with the volume. And that's when we became very concerned with the document imaging system, the DIS volume, because I think that could be replicated with the DIS volume. I've seen Customs put in steps to avoid those types of issues because they are structural in nature to address the volume issue. So, and it's also why it's so important to have the production level programming available to test, because it wasn't available long enough in air AMS. And the CERT environment is good for some testing, but it's not the same as a live environment. It just simply is not the same as the production environment. And one of the key takeaways from the air AMS is we need to test vigorously in the production environment to move forward. I think it contributed to moving the deadlines. It definitely did. Whether we can utilize that to further move the deadlines, I think that's really not a possibility other than a volume issue.
Yeah, and just to add to that, and that was one of the questions why it was delayed. One of the things that came out of the air manifest problem was what should the lines, or what are the lines of communication when we have a problem? I mean, there were thousands of shipments that were impacted by this. Different port practices, and one of the things that we asked for was a level of escalation. Where do we go? Who do we contact? And how is that going to work? And do you have the resources to do it? We can't have, and we did. There were hundreds of air cargo shipments that were sitting there because of communication problems and whatnot. So right after that, we wanted to make sure that CBP had the resources. We knew where to contact if we have a problem. You can't be spending the afternoon calling around trying to find out where to go. So we want to make sure that is all set up prior to the cutover.
Yeah. FCC data. FCC is one of the, I think, successes of this. When CBP told all of the agencies, look at all the data that you're asking for and what are you doing with that. The FCC actually said, we don't do much with the FCC data. We're getting so much. When this form came out, there were not very many products that were actually subject to our regulations. We now regulate so many products that the release data that we're getting is not conducive to our regulatory approach. So what they did is they are in the regulatory process of removing the need to file FCC data. So that's, I think, a great success of that. What about Type 23 entries? Are they going to be allowed to be RLF? TIBs, yes. TIBs are going to be RLF. So that's everything's going to be RLF. Essentially, the artificial limitation for RLF is going to be lifted for all of entry types. So that is one of the other good successes for ACE, I think, as well as the single entry bonds will be allowed for RLF entries. It'll be allowed for almost every entry type.
So, and one of the questions here is on quota. So we've had a lot of conversations with them about quota and a hard cutover date with all the other entry types. ACE entry summary, we're able to go in and test it if we have a problem. But there wasn't any time in quota entries to do dual processing in ACS and ACE. And, can you just talk about that for a second? Well,
ACE and ACS. So ACS actually has a separate quota module. So when you sent in a customs entry in ACS, you sent it in and you had to present a hard copy. That's because customs took it in and had to put it in a quota module. And then that quota module took it, and especially for those that closed upon opening, the quota module then would allocate the quota to each of the underlying entry summaries. In ACE, that process changed. So it's more automated. So the problem with running those two systems at the same time is that the ACS quota module could not compete with the ACE module. So the ACE module would allocate it automatically, and then the ACS quota module would be done kind of like at the end of the day process. So there was really a barrier to trying to run those two systems at the same time. We have talked to them about some of the challenges with turning one system off and one system on, and the need for a backup. We have also asked for, a what if. We definitely need if this system goes down, you need to tell us and give us a backup process, because if quota, is not allocated properly, there's many issues that are going to have to be dealt with. So we do need a backup process for this. Especially for those that close upon opening, as well as the TPL, the trade preference level quotas that are filed as O2 entries, such as the northern border and the southern border for TPL. Some of those are automated. The Canadian TPLs are automated, so if those don't work, that's an issue that we're going to have, especially at the end of the year when we have ID processes that we're going to have to navigate around. So we have asked Customs for a better understanding of how that cutover is going to work. How those, if we have a TPL and an ID procedure at the end of the year, how is that going to work? We start it in one and file the entry in another. How is that going to work? And what is our backup process if this fails? Because anytime you have an up-down, on and off light switch process, you have to have an ability to go back to the old system if it doesn't work. So we're a little more concerned about that type of process.
There's a question on here about AII not being programmed in ACE and assume the requirements to enter merchandise line by line to mimic the invoice is not needed anymore. This was a major issue that we brought up with CBP. That's one of the things that they did not program for in Core ACE because they didn't think that those looking at the data in CBP needed the data. They'd rather see the commercial invoice. We explained to them the importance of EDI transmission between the brokerage community and their importing and how big that is. So they said they would be looking at this and programming after Core ACE is finished. So I guess it's up to the broker whether they want to enter line by line currently right now, because our goal is to get that in there. Right now, those who are providing AI invoicing have to program to print that information if necessary, if DIS is required.
And I think one of the important things to point out, I think there's two issues with the AII. Customs doesn't really want an AII unless they ask for it. And one of the reasons that led to this decision was they were getting a lot of AII transmissions, and they kind of hang out in the customs system unless there's a request for it that goes out and looks for it. So they had all of these AIIs hanging out in the customs system that the system didn't know what to do with. So they're like, why do we have all of these out here? So and also there was not an understanding that a lot of brokers had automated this. In the meantime, that we were getting a lot of this information electronically from our importers. And they were also seeing some issues with quality where, some brokers were inputting that information incorrectly. And we simply pointed out to them that if it was a quality issue, doing away with the automated functionality was not necessarily the best way to deal with that. And we encourage the possibility that there should be more active communication in the future about, major changes like this. So we'll take one more question, and I think we're basically over our time already, and we have, I would say, probably 100 questions here. We'll try to get a lot of these answered and out to you. Do we have one that looks...
Talked about quota.
Yeah.
Participation in the PGA pilots opens to new filers at this point. They are looking for pilot participants. So yes, reach out to that respective agency. There were Federal Register notices provided on all of them, and if you need to find out where those are, please send us an email. But they are looking for participants in the pilots, and we encourage our members, if what we've been saying to the government agencies, reach out to your particular points. As you as a broker and importer have a good relationship with that government agency in that particular port, they're looking for your assistance in a controlled environment, hold your hand to test the system. There's been a number of our members who've been actively involved with the development of ACE, been early adopters, who've been piloting, and we all have to thank them very much because they've been carrying a heavy load, a heavy lift on behalf of all of us, and we really need some other participants in there. As Cindy said before, if you get into a pilot, it does not mean that you have to submit all your entries through that particular pilot. You can pick one, they can check the data set, you can work with the government agency, but we do need some assistance in that to test the data.
Okay, and I think that's it. So thank you, everyone, for participating. We'll try to get some of these questions out in the next couple of days. We have some pretty detailed questions. Some of these, actually, I think we're going to send to Sandy on Friday, because I think she will address some of these in her presentation. I want to encourage you all to, if you aren't signed up for her presentation on Sunday or on Friday, please do sign up for this, because I think she will be addressing a lot of these more detailed questions that you have in her presentation. So thank you. And Cece, if you have any closing comments.
Okay, thank you, Cindy. That concludes today's webinar. Thank you all for joining, and thank you, Cindy and Jeff, for your time and efforts in putting together today's webinar. I'd just like to remind everyone to please complete the survey that was included in the webinar credential email, and it seems like a lot of people didn't get the presentation, so I'll be resending that out later today. Thank you again for your participation, and enjoy